Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. My name's Millie and I'm here with one of our candidates for Education Officer, Jacob Withington. I'll be asking him about his manifesto and why you should vote for him to be your Education Officer for the next academic year. Would you mind introducing yourself quickly, please, Jacob, and perhaps let's start with why you decided to run in these elections.
Sure. So I'm Jacob, as you said, running to be your next Education Officer. I'm an experienced candidate from being a faculty rep in physics in science this year and an academic rep in physics for a couple of years. From speaking to students, I've learned a lot about what needs to improve here. And while I've fought to do that on the science level and the faculty level, there's a lot that I want to apply to the university-wide level and apply that experience.
Cool. So let's start with some reflections from COVID. We all know that it's really affected the last 2 academic years, particularly in terms of teaching and assessments, which would come under the education remit. Fingers crossed it would be less disruptive next academic year, but in your manifesto you talk about identifying best practices. So do you think there's anything that has been a valuable lesson from these times that you might carry forward to future academic years, or perhaps that you would reform as a result of living through these strange times?
Yeah, I was actually just in the academic council where we were discussing this issue. But some of the things that I think are great that we've learned can be done and work really well are recorded online lectures. I know I've realised how little I used to learn and how much I'm learning now from being able to pause and rewind lectures. So that would be great to carry forward in the departments where it works, because I understand in other ones, such as in humanities and social sciences, it doesn't necessarily work as well. But then we've also discovered the need for peer learning and that peer support, how valuable it is and how much people are missing it. So we need to make sure that is present in future years if we are still in the same position or if they want to keep going online.
And do you have any ideas for concrete ways that peer support could be reintroduced or improved?
Yeah, well, I think the PAL system is a very valuable thing that we've got at the moment. I think it needs to be expanded to more courses and departments. And also at the moment, it should be pushed to be online if safe to do so, but also having in person, sorry, but also having an online option available for those who don't want to come in or don't feel safe to. But also I want to review the PAL system and the peer mentoring system, because it doesn't necessarily work effectively in all cases and it's not being fully utilised, but it's a great sort of starting point.
Okay. And is there anything you would change in terms of exams and assessments based on the transformation that we've seen recently?
Yeah, well, I think it is really good that you don't have a set time limit anymore, because that doesn't really reflect what you've learned. It's just how much you can memorise, and the fact that it's open book comes hand in hand with that. So it'd be great to keep that. But there are some sort of niggly bits that need to be sorted out. Well, I say niggly bits, making sure that exams don't overrun, because some very hard, very long exams have been set, and that needs to be made sure that doesn't carry on. And also on some smaller, the niggly bits I was referring to would be how Inspira functions, such as getting notifications when you submit a paper, so you actually know that you have submitted and there's nothing to worry about, things like that. But then also results, we've seen they've decided to go with a long period where results can come out, which isn't ideal for students. As you can see, your average go up and down over that period. So I think that needs to be looked at, making it a set day, whether it's later on in that period or whenever they are available.
Okay, so would you push for more of the open book exams to stay where possible?
Yes, I would do, because I think it's a better reflection of what you've learned, because what you learn is about understanding, not memorising. But we do need to make sure that exams aren't a lot longer and a lot harder compared to normal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you think that suggestion might face pushback from teachers or university staff? And if so, do you think it's worth the fight for students to move towards more open book and, adapted ways of examining and assessing?
Yeah, so I've been discussing this with lecturers, associate deans, and Peter Lambert, the Pro Vice Chancellor, and there does seem to be that on the majority do seem to be very keen to keep this way because it is understood that this is better it's a better test of what you've learned. But then in some other departments, it may not work as well. Such as I've heard there are difficulties in maths. So while a department response is needed, it's also good to have some consistency where possible, so that people aren't choosing between the best way to do an exam.
Sure. And from speaking to a range of students, quite a few seem concerned about the transition back to in-person exams, having not done an in-person exam for 1 or 2 years, or for freshers, it could even be since their GCSEs, which is a long time to now go back into the traditional way of a 3-hour in an exam hall exam. Do you think perhaps that teaching should be more tailored towards exam technique, or what kind of support would you put in place to help students get ready for that way of assessment again?
Yeah, that is something that really needs to be considered. I think sessions do need to be done on exam technique, because, like you say, people would have been not missed out, that they won't have done in-person exams for a good few years. So that we all would feel uncomfortable being shoved back into that. I know I wouldn't be keen on it, but also sort of promoting, if students are keen on it, having exams online and keeping the current format, but also improving it, because it's also good for international students. You don't have to travel all the way back just to do exams, and better support students with disabilities. There are still some cases where it doesn't, and we need to look into those.
Okay, great. In terms of a less stressful moment, your manifesto also proposes a universal reading week. Could you tell us a bit about why you think it's important, and would you introduce that to both semesters or just one as it currently exists?
Yeah, well, I think it's important because we've seen a lot this year that workload has really affected students, whether it's with the transition online or just it being a big issue that people have identified and everyone is willing to talk about it now. And it doesn't have to be this way. If your course isn't accredited, it is up to the university how much content they put on. So there is room to put in a reading week if too much content is covered. So it would help with workloads, give you time to catch up, because it's very easy to fall behind at the moment. It's been established, and well-being, just that break instead of going at it full pout for a whole semester, whatever it is, 11 weeks, and then Christmas and exams in semester 1. It's almost like you don't stop until ISB, which is a very short break. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I think I missed the last part of your question. I don't think I've addressed.
I said, would you add it to both semesters?
Yeah, I think there is some flexibility to see what sort of suits departments. It'd be great to have it consistent across all, but it depends what suits different areas. Personally, I do think it'd be really beneficial in both semesters.
Okay, great. A key theme of your manifesto and of the role as education officer is ensuring that the student voice is heard on matters of education. And you have mentioned an idea of an anonymous reporting tool to identify malpractice. Could you explain a bit about why you think that's necessary and how it might work and what you hope it might do? Yeah,
so this is sort of addressing an underlying theme that has come up a lot, that people have issues with whether it's modules or by the way they're taught, bad practice occurring, and suggestions to the SU, but they're not willing to voice up and say them, whether it's to their reps, to lecturers, or to the SU. So I think an anonymous system would be really beneficial. How that is implemented, I think there's lots of scope, whether it's an overarching one that you just send it in, send the category, like maybe what year degree you're in, and then it gets forwarded to your rep, or whether you just get forwarded to a page for your rep or for whoever, where there is an anonymous system. I think there's a lot of scope, but people don't feel confident to raise issues, and I think that's a big problem, because we can improve the way things work if people do.
Sure. Your opposition, Ben, who's also running for education officer, mentions study spaces in his manifesto, which is often a common theme in the education officer race. How would you feel about continuing the booking system for study spaces post-COVID if there is a post-COVID time, because some people have suggested that might be a good idea, or maybe we need penalties if people don't show up for a booking. Yeah, how would you maximise study space in the next academic year?
I think the booking system's pretty poor, to be honest. Having used it, you only get a certain amount of time. You have to have an hour in between and things like that. You have to check in, which, I mean, I've turned up to study space and forgot to check in, and then it suddenly disappears and you can't book it because there are the rules. So I don't think the current system is good. In the future, I'm not sure about a booking system. I think there should be enough space for every student, to be honest. Whoever wants to study should be able to go up and get a space. If there is a tool to see what space is available, that would be really helpful. But I'm keen in expanding space when it is needed, such as putting seating in atriums, things like that. There is a lot of empty space on campus that could be filled.
Do you have any particular ideas of spaces you could give as examples where you think seats and desks could be added?
Yeah, so the edge, there's sort of atrium as you enter there. If that could be cordoned off, as I guess in some big buildings you get like a cafe that's cordoned off as you go into an atrium if there's a study space there. And one no full west. It's been a while since I've been on campus. There's a lot of open space there, which could be utilised in their atriums. But also pushing for if there is a high demand, actual buildings that are considered that are considering study space rather than also filling our existing space.
Sure. Something else that I pick up on from speaking to students about what's important to them is the need to diversify and decolonise our curriculums. And your manifesto talks about better representation for underrepresented groups, within the existing advisory structures. How do you think the diversification and decolonisation of our curriculums should look in practice? And can you give any examples of ideas you have for different types of courses and how you might go about making sure that it happens?
Yeah, so we've been addressing this in science, really, which we've seen the faculties struggle with because it's less obvious compared to some other areas that are dealt with. And some really great ideas have been thrown around, such as increasing communication, whether it's from students about science and research, or in other parts of the world rather than Europe, and how our understanding of maths and science has developed from other parts of the world. Often you could say stolen in some cases and made and perceived as white ideas. But that also, we have emphasised that it doesn't need to just come from students, it needs to come from lecturers. So whether you're, say, when you proposed this rule, when you're teaching students this rule, it's got this name, but loads of people have contributed to it along the way from different backgrounds, not just this name you're getting at the end. So it relies on us all. I've sort of discovered the need for the SU, whether it's reps and the officers, to be there to make sure that the faculty does actually carry on with the decolonising, because in science they have struggled a little bit initially.
Okay. Having been a Bath student for a number of years yourself and seen other officers take on the education role, is there anything that you've learned from previous tenures as to what you might do or what you might not do if you are elected to education officer?
Yeah, there have been bits and bobs. So I really like how Annie, for example, she's very out in the open, very visible would be the word, actually. So easy to get in contact, often writing blogs. It sort of has that perception that anyone can message her. And others in the past have had a similar thing. I'd really like to carry on that. But also with being involved in the SU, I've seen how the different approaches in making sure that the university is held to account, but also working constructively with them. And I've sort of learned how to, it's a fine balance, I would say, because you want to make sure the students are heard and take them up when there are issues, but you also want to work with them constructively on things so you're not seen as dismissive. So it's been very, very good to learn how to do it.
Mm-hmm. So if you could pick only one thing and make sure that it gets done during your mandate, which is perhaps a tough question, what would it be if you could only pick one?
I think there are three that I'm really struggling to choose between. There's the Universal Reading Week, the increase in transparency in marking through release and average marks and distributions. But I think the one that I would choose would be having sort of liberation academic reps, so reps from less represented backgrounds, whether that's with disabilities, of different races, and international students on SSLCs, like specific roles, because having students represent fellow students is the best way to do things. That we can change things, so more can get done with just that rather than just one policy that does one thing. Having more backgrounds on SSLCs can get a lot more done.
Okay, great. And to end with one fiery question, what makes you a better candidate for education officer than your opposition?
Oh, this is not a nice one. I want to keep this civil. But I would say our main difference is I have a lot of experience in working with the SU and with the university and departments and lecturers on solutions, on bringing up issues, on representing students. I've learned a lot on how to do it and gained a lot of experience from it that I want to apply to the university-wide arena to solve university-wide problems. I'm very passionate about representing every single student and making sure everyone's voice is heard. And the education here works for all. Vote Jake to educate.
Thank you so much. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.